Hello there, and welcome to Whispers of Science, where the mysteries of existence unfold in gentle waves and curiosity finds its most comfortable corner. Tonight, we're embarking on a journey that might just bend your mind in the most delightful way possible. We're exploring one of the universe's greatest enigmas, something so fundamental yet so puzzling that philosophers have pondered it for millennia, and scientists still debate its very nature. Time itself. Is time real, or is it the grandest illusion ever conceived by conscious minds? Does it flow like a river, carrying us from moment to moment? Or is it more like a vast landscape where past, present, and future exist all at once, spread out like pages in an infinite book? And if time is indeed real, what exactly is it made of? These questions have haunted humanity since we first looked up at the stars and wondered about our place in this cosmic dance. Before we dive into these profound depths, I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from tonight and what time it is in your corner of the universe. Isn't it fascinating that we're all experiencing this very moment together? Yet each of us is anchored to our own unique slice of the clock. If you find yourself drawn into this gentle exploration of time's mysteries, I'd be ever so grateful if you gave this video a like and perhaps subscribed it. Helps these whispered conversations about science reach others who might need a peaceful pause to ponder the profound. Now, I do hope this isn't so captivating that it keeps you awake, but if it does well, at least you'll drift off knowing something extraordinary about the fabric of reality itself. So settle in, let your thoughts slow, and prepare to question everything you thought you knew about time, because tonight we're going to discover that time might be far stranger than you ever imagined. Imagine for a moment that you're sitting in a comfortable chair reading a book. The pages turn one by one, carrying you through a story from beginning to end. This feels natural, doesn't it? Time moving forward, like those turning pages taking you from this moment to the next in an endless sequence. But what if I told you that according to some of the brightest minds in physics, those pages might not be turning at all? What if instead you're simply shifting your attention from one page to another while all the pages exist simultaneously? This is the first whisper of our exploration. The possibility that time as we experience it might be fundamentally different from time as it actually is. We feel time flowing. We experience it as a current that carries us forward, but feeling something and understanding its true nature are often very different things. After all, we feel like we're sitting still right now, but in reality, you're spinning through space at incredible speeds as Earth rotates, orbits the sun, and hurtles through the galaxy. Our intuitions about time have been shaped by millions of years of evolution. We needed to track day and night seasons and the rhythms of life to survive. But evolution didn't need to give us an accurate understanding of time's deepest nature. It only needed to give us a sense of time that was useful for staying alive and reproducing. And so we developed what feels like a built-in clock, a sense that time flows from past to future in a steady stream. But here's where things get interesting. When we dig deeper into the nature of time, we discover that our everyday experience might be misleading us in the most extraordinary way. Imagine you're watching a movie on your computer screen. The movie appears to show smooth motion characters, walking, talking, moving through scenes. But underneath that smooth appearance are thousands of individual still frames flashing by so quickly that your brain stitches them together into the illusion of continuous motion. Could time work similarly? Could our sense of flowing time be like that movie, an illusion created by the way our brains process a reality that's actually made up of discrete moments? Or perhaps even stranger, could time be like a vast library where every moment that has ever existed or will ever exist is sitting on a shelf somewhere, and our consciousness is simply moving through that library, reading one book at a time? These aren't just abstract philosophical musings. They're questions that emerge directly from our best scientific theories about the universe when Einstein developed his theories of relativity. He discovered something that shocked even him. Time isn't the universal constant we thought it was. Instead, it's flexible, stretchy, and intimately connected to space in ways that seem to defy common sense. According to relativity, time can speed up or slow down depending on how fast you're moving and how strong the gravitational field is around you. This isn't science fiction, it's been measured and confirmed thousands of times. The clocks on GPS satellites have to be constantly adjusted because time runs slightly faster up there in orbit, away from Earth's gravitational pull. Without these adjustments, your phone's map would be off by miles. But the implications go far deeper than practical applications. If time can stretch and compress, if it's not absolute and universal, then what exactly is it? Einstein himself struggled with this question and came to a startling conclusion. He began to suspect that the flowing river of time we experience might be an illusion, that reality might be more like a landscape where all moments exist eternally. This view, called eternalism or the block universe theory, suggests that past, present, and future are all equally real right now. As you listen to these words, your childhood self is playing somewhere in space time. Your future self is living out moments yet to come from your current perspective, all of it existing simultaneously, like scenes painted on an infinite canvas. If this sounds impossible to believe, you're in good company. Even physicists who work with these ideas daily often struggle to reconcile them with their everyday experience. How can the past still exist when we remember it? How can the future already be there when we haven't experienced it? Yet how can time be an illusion when we feel it so powerfully? But consider this. Have you ever been so absorbed in an activity that hours seem to pass in minutes? Or conversely, have you been so bored that minutes felt like hours? Your experience of time's passage can vary dramatically, even though clocks tick at their steady pace. This suggests that our sense of time's flow isn't purely objective. It's filtered through the lens of consciousness, attention, and emotion. Neuroscientists have discovered that our brains construct our sense of time, much like they construct our sense of color or sound. There's no inherent redness in a rose, no inherent loudness in thunder. These are qualities that emerge from the interaction between electromagnetic waves or air pressure changes and our sensory systems. Could our sense of time's flow be similar, a construction of consciousness rather than a fundamental feature of reality? This leads us to one of the most profound questions in all of science. What is consciousness, and how does it relate to time? Are we passive observers riding along on time's current, or are we active participants in creating the experience of temporal flow? Some theories suggest that consciousness might be the very thing that creates the arrow of time. the sense that there's a meaningful distinction between past and future. Think about memory. You can remember the past, but not the future. This seems obvious, but it's actually quite mysterious if past and future are equally real in the block universe. Why can consciousness only access information from one direction? The answer might lie in the nature of consciousness itself. Perhaps the act of being aware of experiencing, of remembering, creates the flow we associate with time. But there's another possibility entirely. What if time really does flow, but not in the way we think? What if instead of being carried along by time, we're actually moving through it? Like explorers traversing a landscape, this view suggests that time is real and fundamental, but that our motion through it creates the illusion of flow, rather like how driving through a city creates the impression that buildings are moving past you when really you're the one in motion. Or perhaps time is something even stranger. What if it emerges from something deeper, more fundamental? Just as wetness emerges from collections of water molecules, even though individual molecules aren't wet. Maybe time emerges from the quantum interactions of particles at the smallest scales of reality, even though those particles themselves don't experience time. These ideas might seem abstract, but they have profound implications for how we understand ourselves and our place in the universe. If time is an illusion, then in some sense, everything that has ever happened is still happening right now. Your first steps, your first words, every moment of joy and sorrow, all existing eternally in the vast block of spacetime. If time is real, but we're moving through it, then we might be explorers in a temporal landscape with the possibility of understanding navigation in ways we can barely imagine. And if time emerges from something deeper, then we might be on the verge of discovering new, fundamental layers of reality that could revolutionize our understanding of existence itself. These aren't just academic questions, they touch the very heart of what it means to be human, to be conscious, to exist in this mysterious cosmos. As we continue our exploration, we'll dive deeper into each of these possibilities. We'll examine the evidence, the arguments, the implications, and perhaps most importantly, we'll discover how these ideas might change the way you experience your own life. Because understanding time isn't just about understanding the universe, it's about understanding yourself and your journey through whatever time turns out to be. Let's take a step back and consider how we actually experience time in our daily lives, because there's something quite peculiar happening right under our noses. Something so ordinary we rarely stop to notice, yet so extraordinary it might hold clues to time's deepest secrets. Close your eyes for a moment and listen to the sound of your own breathing in and out, in and out. Each breath marks a moment passing. But here's the curious thing: where exactly is the present moment? When you breathe in, the moment of inhalation seems to be now. But by the time you recognize it, that moment has already become the past. And when you anticipate the next breath, that future moment hasn't arrived yet. So, where precisely do you exist? This isn't just philosophical wordplay, it points to something profound about consciousness and temporality. We seem to live in an incredibly thin slice of time, a razor's edge between past and future. But when neuroscientists study how our brains process temporal information, they discover something fascinating. What we experience as now actually takes time to construct. Your brain receives information from your senses, processes, it integrates it with memory, and prediction, and then presents you with what feels like the immediate present. But this process takes roughly a tenth of a second, which means your experience of now is actually a carefully constructed representation of the very recent past. Your brain is constantly creating a slightly delayed version of reality and presenting it to you as the immediate moment. This delay has profound implications for how we understand the relationship between consciousness and time. Are you experiencing the present moment, or are you experiencing your brain's best guess about what the present moment was a fraction of a second ago? And if consciousness is always playing catch up with reality, what does that tell us about the nature of time itself? But the mystery deepens when we consider how our brains predict the future to function effectively in the world. Your nervous system is constantly making predictions about what will happen next when you reach for a cup. Your brain predicts where the cup will be by the time your hand arrives. When you listen to music, your brain predicts the next note in a familiar melody. This predictive processing is so fundamental that some neuroscientists argue consciousness itself is primarily a prediction machine. So, in a strange sense, you're not just living in the past due to processing delays, you're also living in the future through constant prediction. Your experience of the present moment is actually a complex blend of recent past information and near future expectations. What we call now might be more accurately described as a temporal soup, where past, present, and future ingredients combine to create the flavor of conscious experience. This brings us to one of the most intriguing questions in the study of consciousness and time. Do animals experience temporal flow? The way we do, your pet dog certainly seems to anticipate dinner time and remember yesterday's walk, but does it experience the flowing river of time, or does it simply respond to patterns and cues without the metacognitive awareness of temporal passage? Research suggests that different species have radically different relationships with time. Hummingbirds live in what seems like a high speed world where their tiny hearts beat over 1,000 times per minute, and they can navigate between flowers with precision that would be impossible for larger, slower animals. Meanwhile, elephants live in a more leisurely temporal landscape where social relationships and memory patterns unfold over decades. But perhaps most fascinating are the experiments with humans under altered states of consciousness during deep meditation. Experienced practitioners report that the sense of time's flow can completely disappear. Moments can feel like eternities, or hours can pass in what seems like minutes. People who have had near death experiences often describe entering a realm where linear time doesn't apply, where past, present, and future seem to exist simultaneously. These reports might sound mystical, but they're consistent with neurological findings about how the brain constructs temporal experience when certain regions of the brain are less active, particularly those involved in self awareness and executive control. The normal mechanisms that create our sense of flowing time can break down, leading to experiences that feel timeless or where time behaves in impossible ways. This suggests that our ordinary experience of temporal flow might be more fragile and constructed than we realize. It's not that we discover time flowing through careful observation. Instead, our brains actively create the experience of flow through complex neural processes. And when these processes are disrupted, the flowing river of time can transform into something altogether different. Consider what happens when you're dreaming. In dreams, time behaves in the most peculiar ways. You might experience elaborate adventures that feel like they last for hours, only to wake up and discover you've been asleep for minutes. Conversations with dream characters can span what feels like extended periods, yet the actual dream might unfold in seconds. The normal rules of temporal sequence break down entirely. Events can happen in reverse or simultaneously, or in loops that defy logical progression. Yet while you're dreaming, these temporal impossibilities feel completely natural. Your dreaming consciousness doesn't rebel against the strange flow of dream time. Instead, it adapts and accepts, creating meaning and narrative from sequences that would be nonsensical in waking life. This adaptability suggests that our relationship with time is far more flexible than our waking experience suggests. What's particularly intriguing is that lucid dreamers, people who become aware they're dreaming while still in the dream state, often report being able to manipulate the flow of time. Within their dreams, they can slow down dream sequences to examine them in detail or accelerate through boring dream segments. This implies that consciousness doesn't just passively experience time, but can actively participate in shaping temporal flow, at least within the constructed reality of dreams. These insights from neuroscience psychology and studies of consciousness paint a picture of time that's far more complex than the simple flowing river metaphor suggests. Instead of being passive passengers on time's current, we might be active participants in creating our temporal experience. Our brains, our attention, our state of consciousness all contribute to how we experience the passage of moments. But this raises an even deeper question. If consciousness plays such an active role in creating temporal experience, what happens to time when there's no consciousness to experience it? Does time still flow in an empty universe with no observers? Or is the flow of time something that requires conscious beings to exist? Some physicists and philosophers have suggested that consciousness and time might be more intimately connected than we've ever imagined. Perhaps consciousness doesn't just experience time, but actually participates in creating it through the act of observation and measurement. This idea connects to some of the strangest findings in quantum mechanics, where the act of observation seems to play a fundamental role in determining physical reality. If consciousness does participate in creating time, then every moment of awareness, every decision to pay attention to one thing rather than another might be contributing to the unfolding of temporal reality. You wouldn't just be moving through time, you'd be participating in its creation, moment by moment, breath by breath, thought by thought. This perspective suggests that understanding time isn't just a matter of physics or philosophy, but also of psychology, neuroscience, and perhaps even meditation and contemplative practice. The laboratory of consciousness might be just as important as the physics laboratory for unlocking time's deepest secrets. As we continue our journey through these temporal mysteries, we'll explore how modern physics has revealed even stranger aspects of time's nature. We'll discover how space and time are woven together in ways that challenge our most basic assumptions, and we'll examine what it might mean for time to have a beginning, or perhaps even an end. But before we dive into those cosmic depths, let's pause and consider something that might surprise you. The very language we use to talk about time shapes how we experience it. In English, we say time flies when you're having fun, or we're running out of time. These phrases treat time like a resource, something that can be spent, saved, or wasted. But other languages paint entirely different pictures. In Mandarin Chinese, the future is often described as being behind you while the past lies ahead. The logic is elegant. You can see what has already happened, but the future remains hidden behind you, waiting to be revealed. This linguistic difference isn't just poetic, it reflects a fundamentally different way of conceptualizing temporal flow. The Hopi language traditionally had no words that directly correspond to our past, present, and future. Instead, it describes events in terms of their certainty and manifestation. Something either has manifested or is in the process of manifesting. This creates a relationship with time that's less about linear progression and more about degrees of reality and presence. These linguistic variations hint at something profound. Our experience of time isn't just biological or physical, it's also cultural and conceptual. The metaphors we use, the stories we tell ourselves about temporal flow, these shape the very texture of our lived experience, and they suggest that time might be far more malleable than we typically imagine. This malleability becomes even more apparent when we consider how technology is changing our relationship with time. Just a century ago, most people lived by natural rhythms, sunrise, sunset, the changing seasons. But now we carry devices that slice time into precise digital segments. We schedule our lives in 15-minute increments and receive notifications that fragment our attention across multiple temporal streams. Social media has created an entirely new kind of time, the endless scroll where past posts and present updates blend together in a stream that seems to exist outside normal temporal sequence. You might see a photo from your friend's breakfast this morning, followed by a news article from yesterday, followed by a memory from 5 years ago, all presented as equally immediate and relevant. This digital time creates what some researchers call temporal compression, where events from different periods feel simultaneous and equally present. It's as if we're living in multiple timelines at once: our own personal timeline, the global news cycle, the social media feed, each with its own rhythm and flow. Virtual reality takes this even further. In a well designed virtual environment, you can lose all sense of time's passage. Hours can feel like minutes, or minutes like hours. The normal cues that help us track temporal flow, the changing light outside, the gradual fatigue of your body, the social rhythms of other people, all disappear, leaving consciousness alone with its constructed sense of time. These technological alterations of temporal experience aren't just curiosities, they're inadvertent experiments in the nature of time itself. They reveal how dependent our sense of temporal flow is on external cues and social synchronization, and they hint at possibilities for the future, what might happen as these technologies become more sophisticated, more immersive, more capable of manipulating our temporal experience. But perhaps the most profound technological shift in our relationship with time comes from our growing ability to measure it with extraordinary precision. Atomic clocks can now track time so accurately that they wouldn't lose a second over the entire age of the universe. This precision has revealed something startling. Time isn't as uniform as we once believed. Even on Earth, time runs at slightly different rates depending on altitude and gravitational field strength. A clock at the top of a skyscraper runs imperceptibly faster than one at ground level. This isn't science fiction, it's measurable reality, and it means that different parts of your body are literally aging at slightly different rates. Your head is getting older faster than your feet. These discoveries force us to confront a fundamental question. If time can be measured so precisely yet behaves so strangely, what exactly are we measuring when we measure time? Are we tracking some fundamental feature of reality, or are we simply creating increasingly sophisticated ways to coordinate our activities and synchronize our experiences? The answer might depend on whether time is discrete or continuous. Imagine time like a movie again. If time is discrete, then reality unfolds in tiny individual frames, like frames of film too small and fast for us to notice. But if time is continuous, then it flows smoothly like water without any smallest unit or fundamental tick. Quantum mechanics suggests reality might indeed be discrete at the smallest scales. There might be a fundamental unit of time, just as there are fundamental units of energy and matter. This quantum time would be unimaginably small, roughly 10 to the minus 43 seconds. But if it exists, it would mean that time has a granular structure, like digital pixels that only appear smooth from a distance. Alternatively, time might be an emergent property, something that arises from more fundamental processes, just as temperature emerges from the motion of molecules. Even though individual molecules don't have temperature, time might emerge from quantum interactions, even though individual quantum events don't have duration. This emergence view suggests that asking whether time is real might be like asking whether temperature is real. Yes, it has measurable effects and practical importance, but it's not a fundamental feature of reality. Instead, it's a useful description of something more basic. But emergence raises its own puzzles. If time emerges from quantum processes, what determined the rate of emergence? Why does time seem to flow at the speed it does, rather than faster or slower, and most mysteriously of all? How did processes that don't themselves involve time give rise to temporal experience? These questions point towards some of the deepest unsolved problems in physics and philosophy. The relationship between the quantum world and the classical world. We experience the connection between physical processes and conscious experience and the ultimate nature of reality itself. As we grapple with these mysteries, it's worth remembering that our current understanding of time has already undergone radical revolutions. Newton thought time was absolute and universal, flowing at the same rate everywhere. Einstein showed that time is relative and flexible, connected to space and gravity. Quantum mechanics revealed that reality itself might be probabilistic and uncertain rather than deterministic. Each of these revolutions forced humanity to abandon comfortable assumptions about the nature of existence, and each opened up new possibilities, new technologies, new ways of understanding our place in the cosmos. We might be on the verge of another such revolution, one that will transform our understanding of time consciousness and reality in ways we can barely imagine. Consider the implications. If time really is an illusion, then your childhood self isn't gone, but exists eternally in some region of spacetime. Your future self isn't waiting to be born, but already exists in another temporal location. Death wouldn't be an ending, but simply the boundary of your personal region in the block universe. If time is real, but emerges from something deeper, then we might discover new ways to influence its flow, new technologies that could slow aging, extend life, or even allow limited forms of time travel. If consciousness participates in creating time, then meditation, contemplation, and awareness practices might be more than personal development. They might be ways of participating more consciously in the fundamental processes of reality. And if time is something else entirely, something we haven't yet imagined, then the future holds possibilities that would seem like magic from our current perspective. Perhaps we'll discover that time has multiple dimensions, or that it branches and merges like a river delta. Perhaps we'll find that consciousness can navigate temporal landscapes in ways that transcend our current limitations. These aren't just abstract speculations, they're possibilities that emerge directly from our current best theories about the nature of reality. And as our understanding deepens, as our technologies become more sophisticated, as our capacity for precise measurement and theoretical modeling continues to expand, we move closer to answering questions that have puzzled humanity for millennia. The mystery of time touches every aspect of human experience: our sense of identity, our relationships, our hopes and fears, our understanding of life and death. Yet it remains one of the most elusive concepts in all of science, simultaneously the most familiar thing we know and the most profound mystery we face. As we continue exploring these temporal depths, we'll discover how Einstein's insights revolutionized not just physics, but our entire conception of reality itself. We'll journey into the strange world of spacetime, where past and future lose their absolute meaning, and will confront questions that challenge the very foundations of how we understand existence. But perhaps the most mind bending aspect of our temporal journey lies not in abstract theory, but in the tangible effects we can observe right here on Earth. Every morning when you wake up, you're witnessing one of the most extraordinary demonstrations of time's malleable nature, though it unfolds so subtly that we rarely pause to marvel at its implications. Your smartphone, that constant companion in your pocket, relies on a network of satellites orbiting high above our planet. Those satellites carry atomic clocks, the most precise timekeepers humanity has ever created. Yet without constant correction, these clocks would drift away from Earth based time by about 38 microseconds every single day. That might sound trivial, but those tiny fractions of a second would render your GPS navigation completely useless within hours. Why do these clocks drift? Because time itself runs differently up there in orbit. The satellites experience weaker gravity than we do down here on the surface, and according to Einstein's insights, weaker gravity means faster flowing time. Meanwhile, their high speed motion through space has the opposite effect, slowing their clocks down. The result is a delicate dance between competing relativistic effects, a cosmic ballet that plays out every moment above our heads. This isn't theoretical physics confined to university classrooms. It's happening right now, affecting every text message you send, every navigation route you follow, every moment you spend connected to the digital world. The universe is conducting a grand experiment in temporal relativity, and we're all unwitting participants in its unfolding. But gravity's influence on time extends far beyond satellite corrections. Imagine you could somehow build a tower so tall it reached from Earth's surface to the edge of space, A clock at the bottom of this tower would tick more slowly than one at the top. The difference would be tiny, but measurable with our most sensitive instruments. Your head is literally aging faster than your feet, though the difference amounts to less than a nanosecond over your entire lifetime. This gravitational time dilation becomes more dramatic as gravity grows stronger. Near a black hole, where gravity warps space-time into impossible curves, time stretches like taffy. An astronaut falling toward a black hole would experience time normally from their own perspective, but to an outside observer, they would appear to slow down dramatically as they approached the event horizon. Eventually, they would seem to freeze in time, their image redshifted into invisibility as light itself struggles to escape gravity's grip. These extreme examples illuminate something profound about the nature of temporal experience. Time isn't just a backdrop against which events unfold, it's intimately woven into the fabric of reality itself. When we say that gravity bends space, we must also say it bends time. They are not separate entities, but aspects of a unified four-dimensional tapestry that physicists call spacetime. This unified view revolutionizes how we think about motion and causality. In our everyday experience, we move through space while time carries us forward like a river current. But Einstein revealed that we're actually moving through space-time, carving out paths called world lines that extend from our birth to our death. Your entire existence, from your first breath to your last, forms a continuous thread woven through the fabric of space-time. From this perspective, asking whether you're moving through time or time is flowing past you becomes like asking whether you're climbing a mountain or the mountain is sinking beneath your feet. The question assumes a separation between you and time that may not actually exist. Instead, you are embedded within time, inseparable from it, your consciousness threading its way through the temporal dimensions of reality. This embedding suggests something remarkable about the relationship between mind and time. Perhaps consciousness doesn't merely observe temporal flow, but participates in creating it. Every decision you make, every moment of attention, every memory you form might be active contributions to the unfolding of temporal reality. Rather than being passive passengers on time's journey, we might be co-creators of the very experience we call temporal passage. Consider how memory shapes your sense of time's flow. Without memory, each moment would exist in isolation, disconnected from past and future. There would be no narrative thread linking experiences together, no sense of personal history or anticipated future. Memory doesn't just record temporal experience, it creates the continuity that allows us to perceive time as flowing rather than as disconnected snapshots. But memory itself is far stranger than it appears. Neuroscientists have discovered that remembering isn't like playing back a recording. Instead, each time you recall a memory, your brain reconstructs it from scattered fragments stored throughout your neural networks. These reconstructions are influenced by your current state of mind, your emotions, and even memories you've formed since the original event. In a very real sense, the past is constantly being recreated in the present moment. This reconstructive nature of memory has profound implications for how we understand personal identity across time. The person you were 10 years ago had different thoughts, different knowledge, perhaps even different values and beliefs. Your body has replaced most of its cells multiple times since then. In what sense are you the same person who existed a decade ago? Is personal identity something that persists through time, or is it continuously recreated moment by moment through the ongoing process of memory reconstruction? These questions become even more puzzling when we consider the strange case of patients with anterograde amnesia who cannot form new memories after brain injury. For these individuals, time seems frozen at the moment of their injury. They live in an eternal present, unable to create the narrative continuity that normally links moments together into a flowing stream. Their condition reveals how dependent our normal sense of temporal flow is on the brain's ability to weave memories into coherent stories. Dreams offer another window into time's malleable nature. In the dreaming state, temporal logic dissolves entirely. You might experience decades of dream time in minutes of real sleep, or find yourself simultaneously present at multiple periods narratives can of your life. Dream unfold backwards, loop endlessly, or branch into parallel storylines that coexist without contradiction. Yet while dreaming, these temporal impossibilities feel perfectly natural. The dreaming brain seems to operate by different temporal rules, constructing experience from memory fragments without the usual constraints of sequential time. This suggests that linear temporal flow might be more of a waking convention than a fundamental feature of consciousness. Perhaps our ordinary sense of time's passage is like a particular operating system that consciousness runs while awake, but which can be suspended or altered under different conditions. Meditation traditions have long recognized this flexibility of temporal experience. Advanced practitioners report states of consciousness where the normal flow of time seems to stop entirely, where past and future collapse into an eternal present moment. These experiences aren't mere subjective illusions, but reflect genuine alterations in how the brain processes temporal information. Brain imaging studies show that deep meditative states involve decreased activity in regions associated with self referential thinking and temporal processing. These contemplative insights align surprisingly well with physics' most radical theories about time. If the block universe theory is correct, then all moments exist simultaneously in the four-dimensional structure of spacetime. The flowing river of time would indeed be a kind of illusion created by consciousness as it encounters different regions of this eternal landscape. From this perspective, the mystic's experience of timeless presence might be closer to reality's true nature than our ordinary sense of temporal flow. But even if time is ultimately illusory, the illusion has extraordinary consistency and utility. Clocks measure its passage with incredible precision. Physical processes unfold according to temporal rhythms. Cause precedes effect in reliable sequences. The arrow of time points steadily from past to future, marked by increasing entropy in the irreversible flow of energy from organized to disorganized states. This temporal arrow emerges from the fundamental asymmetry between past and future. Eggs break, but don't spontaneously reassemble. Perfume spreads through a room, but doesn't spontaneously concentrate back into the bottle. Memory records the past, but not the future. These asymmetries all point in the same direction, creating the psychological, thermodynamic, and causal arrows of time that give temporal experience its characteristic orientation. Yet the ultimate origin of this temporal arrow remains one of physics' greatest mysteries. The fundamental laws of nature are largely time symmetric, working equally well forwards or backwards. The arrow seems to emerge from initial conditions rather than fundamental laws, suggesting that time's direction is more about cosmic history than cosmic law. This historical perspective on time's arrow points toward questions about the universe's beginning and possible end. If time has a direction, does it also have boundaries? Did time begin with the Big Bang, or does it extend infinitely into the past? Will it continue forever, or might there be an ultimate end to temporal experience? These cosmological questions about time's scope connect our personal experience of temporal flow to the grandest scales of cosmic evolution. As we stand on the threshold of these cosmic mysteries, we find ourselves confronting questions that challenge our deepest assumptions about existence itself. Time, which seemed so familiar and straightforward, reveals itself as perhaps the most enigmatic feature of reality. It connects the quantum realm to the cosmic scale, the physical world to the world of consciousness, the scientific description of nature to our most intimate personal experience. The journey into time's mysteries has only just begun. Each answer we uncover seems to reveal new depths of questioning, new layers of complexity that stretch our understanding toward its limits. Yet perhaps this endless deepening of mystery is itself a clue to time's nature. Maybe time isn't meant to be solved like a puzzle, but experienced like a poem, appreciated for its beauty and depth rather than reduced to simple explanations. But perhaps the most startling realization about time comes not from the cosmos above, but from the quantum realm below, where reality operates by rules so strange they seem to mock our everyday experience. In the world of atoms and particles, time reveals behaviors that challenge everything we thought we knew about temporal flow. Consider the phenomenon quantum physicists call superposition. At the quantum scale, particles exist in multiple states simultaneously until they're observed or measured. An electron can spin both clockwise and counterclockwise at the same time. A photon can travel through multiple paths simultaneously. These aren't mere metaphors or mathematical conveniences. They're measurable features of reality that have been confirmed in countless experiments. But here's where it gets truly mind-bending. If particles can exist in multiple states simultaneously, what does that mean for time itself? Some interpretations of quantum mechanics suggest that not only can particles be in multiple places at once, but events can exist in temporal superposition, happening and not happening simultaneously, until observation collapses the quantum state into a definite outcome. This quantum view of time suggests that the future might not be singular, but multiple and existing as a cloud of possibilities that gradually crystallize into definite outcomes through the process of observation and measurement. Your future self might exist in quantum superposition right now, simultaneously experiencing countless possible life paths until the wave function of reality collapses moment by moment into the specific timeline you consciously experience. The implications stretch far beyond abstract theory. If consciousness plays a role in collapsing quantum states, then every moment of awareness, every conscious observation, might be actively participating in selecting which possible future becomes actual. You wouldn't just be discovering your future as it unfolds, you'd be helping to create it through the very act of conscious observation. This participatory view of time connects to ancient wisdom traditions that speak of reality as fundamentally collaborative, requiring both objective processes and subjective awareness to manifest fully. The Hindu concept of Leela suggests that existence is a kind of cosmic play where consciousness and cosmos dance together to create the appearance of separate subjects and objects, observers and observed. Modern quantum mechanics, with its emphasis on the role of measurement and observation, echoes these ancient insights in surprisingly precise ways. But quantum mechanics also reveals another peculiar aspect of time's nature through the phenomenon of quantum entanglement. When two particles that become entangled, they form a single quantum system that persists even when separated by vast distances. Measuring one particle instantly affects its entangled partner, regardless of the space between them. Einstein famously called this spooky action at a distance, though experiments have repeatedly confirmed its reality. What's particularly fascinating about entanglement is its relationship to simultaneity. When entangled particles affect each other instantaneously across space, they seem to operate outside the normal constraints of spacetime. This suggests that at the quantum level, there might be connections that transcend our ordinary notions of temporal sequence and spatial separation. Some physicists speculate that entanglement might be related to the fundamental structure of spacetime itself. Perhaps the fabric of reality is woven from quantum entanglements, with space and time emerging from more basic quantum relationships. This view, called the holographic principle, suggests that all the information contained in a volume of space can be encoded on its boundary, like a hologram where three-dimensional images emerge from two-dimensional surfaces. If space-time itself emerges from quantum entanglement, then time might be fundamentally relational rather than absolute. Instead of flowing independently, temporal relationships would arise from the patterns of connection and correlation between quantum systems. Time wouldn't be a stage on which events play out, but rather the music that emerges when quantum systems dance together in complex patterns of entanglement and correlation. This relational view of time has profound implications for how we understand causality and free will. In a world where quantum events can be genuinely random and where observation plays an active role in determining outcomes, the future becomes open in ways that classical physics never imagined. Rather than being predetermined by past conditions, each moment might involve genuine novelty, real choices between possible futures that couldn't be predicted even in principle. Yet this quantum openness coexists with remarkable regularities and patterns. Statistical laws govern quantum behavior, even when individual events remain unpredictable. The wave function evolves according to precise mathematical equations, even as its collapse introduces fundamental randomness. Order and chaos, determinism and freedom, necessity and contingency all seem to coexist in the quantum realm's strange temporal landscape. These quantum insights into time's nature become even more mysterious when we consider the role of information in physical processes. Modern physics increasingly recognizes information as fundamental to reality's structure. Some theories suggest that matter and energy are themselves forms of information, patterns of quantum bits that process and transform through time. If reality is fundamentally informational, then time might be understood as the dimension along which information processing occurs. The flow of time would be the flow of computation as the universe processes information about its own state. updating moment by moment, like a cosmic computer running the program of existence. From this perspective, consciousness wouldn't be separate from physical processes, but would be a particular kind of information processing that creates subjective experience from objective data. This computational view of time connects to fascinating questions about the relationship between physical time and computational time. In computer simulations, events can be sped up, slowed down, paused, or even run backwards. If the universe is indeed a kind of cosmic computer, might there be levels of reality where time operates according to different computational rhythms? Could consciousness exist at multiple temporal scales simultaneously, experiencing both the rapid fluctuations of quantum processes and the slow evolution of cosmic structures? These questions become particularly intriguing when we consider artificial intelligence and its potential relationship to temporal experience. As AI systems become more sophisticated, might they develop their own forms of temporal consciousness? Could digital minds experience time differently than biological ones, perhaps operating at computational speeds that make human temporal experience seem glacially slow by comparison? The prospect of artificial temporal consciousness raises profound questions about the nature of subjective time itself. If machines can experience temporal flow, what does that tell us about the relationship between physical processes and conscious experience? Is temporal consciousness something that emerges naturally from sufficiently complex information processing systems, or does it require specific biological structures that evolved over millions of years? These questions aren't merely theoretical. As virtual reality and augmented reality technologies become more sophisticated, we're already beginning to experiment with artificial temporal environments. Digital worlds can operate according to different temporal rules than physical reality, allowing experiences that would be impossible in ordinary spacetime. Players can slow down time, speed it up, or even move backwards through temporal sequences. What's particularly fascinating is how readily human consciousness adapts to these artificial temporal environments. Within minutes of entering a virtual world with altered time flow, players often report that the artificial temporal rules feel natural and intuitive. This adaptability suggests that consciousness might be more temporally flexible than we typically assume, capable of operating according to different temporal logics depending on context and environment. This flexibility extends beyond digital environments to altered states of consciousness induced by meditation, music, or other practices. Drummers and dancers often report entering flow states where time seems to stretch or compress, where complex rhythmic patterns unfold with effortless precision despite their intricate timing. Musicians describe moments when improvised passages seem to play themselves, emerging from a temporal space that feels both personal and transpersonal. These experiences suggest that consciousness might naturally operate at multiple temporal scales simultaneously. While our ordinary awareness tracks the familiar rhythms of seconds, minutes, and hours, deeper levels of consciousness might be synchronized to quantum fluctuations, neural oscillations, circadian cycles, seasonal changes, and even longer biological and cosmic rhythms. Indigenous cultures often recognize this multiplicity of temporal scales in their understanding of time as circular rather than linear. Many traditional societies organize their activities according to natural cycles that repeat at different scales: daily sunrise and sunset, monthly lunar phases, annual seasonal changes, and longer cycles that span multiple generations. From this cyclical perspective, time isn't a straight line moving from past to future, but a spiral where patterns repeat at ever larger scales, creating opportunities for learning, healing, and growth. This cyclical understanding of time offers a different relationship to mortality and meaning. If time spirals rather than flows linearly, then death isn't an ending, but a transition to a different scale of temporal experience. The patterns that constitute a life continue to influence future cycles, even as individual consciousness transforms into something new. Personal time becomes part of larger temporal rhythms that extend far beyond individual existence. Modern physics actually supports aspects of this cyclical view through its understanding of conservation laws and symmetries. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed from one form to another. The atoms that make up your body have existed for billions of years before your birth and will continue existing for billions of years after your death, cycling through countless forms and configurations. In this sense, you're not separate from the cosmic processes that create and transform matter and energy, but a temporary pattern in their eternal dance. This conservation perspective suggests that time might be less about loss and more about transformation. What we experience as temporal flow might be the universe's way of exploring all possible configurations of matter, energy, and information. Each moment brings new patterns into existence while transforming existing patterns into new forms. Nothing is truly lost, but everything is constantly being renewed. Yet this transformational view of time coexists with the undeniable reality of irreversibility and entropy. While energy is conserved, it becomes less organized over time, spreading from concentrated forms into more diffuse distributions. This thermodynamic arrow of time creates genuine asymmetries between past and future, giving temporal experience its characteristic direction and urgency. The tension between conservation and entropy, between cyclical patterns and irreversible flow, captures something essential about time's paradoxical nature. It simultaneously preserves and transforms, repeats and innovates, connects and separates. Perhaps this paradox isn't a problem to be solved, but a fundamental feature of temporal reality that reflects the deep creativity embedded in existence itself. As we continue exploring these temporal paradoxes, we find ourselves approaching questions that stretch beyond physics and philosophy into realms of meaning and mystery that science alone cannot fully illuminate. Time reveals itself as not just a dimension of physical reality, but as the very medium in which consciousness, creativity, and purpose unfold their intricate patterns. The deeper we venture into time's mysteries, the more we encounter questions that seem to dissolve the very foundations of rational thought. Consider this curious puzzle. If time is the dimension in which change occurs, what allows time itself to change? We speak of time speeding up or slowing down, but relative to what? The very concept seems to require a kind of meta-time, a temporal backdrop against which time's own transformations unfold. This puzzle points toward one of the most perplexing aspects of temporal experience, its self-referential nature. Time is the measure of duration, yet it has duration. It's the context in which events occur, yet it seems to be an event itself. It's the framework within which we understand sequence and causality, yet its own sequence and causes remain deeply mysterious. Perhaps nowhere is this self referential puzzle more apparent than in our attempts to understand time's beginning. Cosmology tells us that the universe began approximately 13.8 billion years ago in an event we call the Big Bang. But what does it mean to speak of time having a beginning? Before the Big Bang, was there no time at all, or was there some other kind of temporality that we can barely imagine? The question becomes even more paradoxical when we consider causation. What caused the Big Bang? In our ordinary experience, causes precede their effects in time. But if time itself began with the Big Bang, then the very notion of a prior cause seems to dissolve into meaninglessness. We find ourselves in the strange position of trying to understand temporal causation at the very moment when temporality itself comes into existence. Some cosmologists have proposed solutions that stretch imagination to its limits. Perhaps our universe emerged from a quantum fluctuation in a larger multiverse, where different regions operate according to different temporal rules. Maybe time is cyclical on the grandest scales, with universes expanding and contracting in eternal rhythms that have no ultimate beginning or end. Or perhaps time branches and merges like a vast river system, with our universe representing just one stream in an infinite temporal delta. These speculative scenarios highlight how our understanding of time becomes increasingly poetic as we approach its deepest mysteries. The mathematical precision that serves us so well in describing time's local behavior seems to give way to metaphor and imagination when we confront questions about time's ultimate nature and origin. Perhaps this isn't a limitation of our current knowledge, but a clue that time itself operates at the intersection of the measurable and the ineffable. This intersection becomes particularly apparent when we consider how temporal experience varies across different scales of organization. At the quantum level, time appears probabilistic and uncertain, with events existing in superposition until observation collapses possibilities into definite outcomes. At the molecular level, time manifests through chemical reactions and thermal fluctuations that follow statistical rather than deterministic patterns. At the cellular level, biological clocks create rhythmic patterns that synchronize with environmental cycles. As we move to larger scales, new temporal phenomena emerge. Organisms develop circadian rhythms that anticipate daily changes in their environment. Populations evolve over generations through processes that unfold across thousands of years. Ecosystems maintain dynamic equilibria that persist for millennia while continuously transforming their constituent relationships. Geological processes reshape landscapes over millions of years, while stellar evolution marks time on scales of billions of years. Each of these temporal scales operates according to its own logic and rhythm, yet they're all interconnected in ways that create the rich temporal texture of reality as we experience it. Your heartbeat synchronizes with circadian cycles that evolved to match Earth's rotation around a star whose nuclear fusion processes began billions of years ago. The words you're hearing now depend on neural processes that unfold in milliseconds, yet they carry meanings that have developed over centuries of linguistic evolution. This hierarchical organization of temporal scales suggests that time might be fundamentally layered rather than uniform. Rather than flowing at a single rate everywhere, temporal experience might emerge from the interaction between multiple rhythmic processes operating at different scales. Your sense of present moment awareness might arise from the synchronization of neural oscillations, while your sense of personal identity might emerge from the much slower processes of memory formation and narrative construction. This multi scale understanding of time has profound implications for how we think about agency and free will. If consciousness operates across multiple temporal scales simultaneously, then our capacity for choice and intention might not be confined to the thin slice of the present moment. Perhaps we're constantly making decisions at different temporal scales, from the immediate reactions that unfold in milliseconds to the long term life choices that shape decades of experience. Consider how you experience making a significant life decision. The moment of conscious choice might feel immediate and decisive, but it typically emerges from weeks or months of subconscious processing, influenced by patterns established over years of experience, guided by values that developed over decades of moral reflection. The decision isn't really made in a single moment, but crystallizes gradually through processes that operate at vastly different temporal scales. This gradual crystallization of decision suggests that consciousness might not be localized to a single temporal point, but distributed across extended periods of time. Your current state of awareness might include not just immediate sensory experience, but also the reverberating echoes of past experiences and the anticipatory shadows of potential futures. Rather than existing at a knife edge present, consciousness might be temporally extended, gathering information from the past and projecting possibilities into the future to create the rich texture of present moment experience. This temporally extended view of consciousness aligns with recent neuroscientific discoveries about predictive processing. Your brain is constantly generating predictions about future sensory input based on past experience and current context. These predictions don't just prepare you for what's coming next, they actively shape your current perceptual experience. What you see, hear, and feel right now is partially a construction based on your brain's best guesses about what's happening in your environment. If consciousness is fundamentally predictive, then it's also fundamentally temporal. Every moment of awareness involves a complex interaction between memory based expectations and sensory updates that confirm or disconfirm those expectations. You're not just experiencing the present moment, you're constantly comparing present experience with predicted experience, updating your internal models, and generating new predictions for the next moment. This predictive aspect of consciousness has fascinating implications for our understanding of temporal flow. Perhaps the sense that time moves from past to future isn't just a passive observation, but an active construction created by consciousness as it navigates the difference between expected and actual experience. The flow of time might be the subjective signature of this ongoing predictive process, the felt sense of consciousness updating its models in response to the perpetual surprise of existence. But prediction also involves something even more mysterious: the apparent ability of present consciousness to reach forward in time and bring information back from possible futures. When you anticipate the next word in a familiar sentence, or predict the outcome of a physical process, you're demonstrating a kind of temporal clairvoyance that we take for granted, but that remains scientifically puzzling. How does consciousness manage to extract information about future states from present conditions? The obvious answer is that it doesn't really. It simply projects patterns from past experience onto current situations. But this explanation doesn't account for the uncanny accuracy of many predictions or the creative insights that seem to anticipate genuinely novel developments. Artists often describe receiving inspiration that feels like it comes from outside ordinary temporal flow. Scientists report sudden insights that solve problems they've been working on for years. Inventors describe visions of technologies that won't be feasible for decades. These experiences suggest that consciousness might have access to temporal information that transcends simple pattern matching based on past experience. Perhaps consciousness operates as a kind of temporal antenna, sensitive to information patterns that extend across past, present, and future in ways that our current scientific understanding cannot fully explain. This wouldn't require violating physical laws, but might involve subtle quantum effects or information processing capabilities that we haven't yet recognized or measured. The possibility that consciousness might be temporally extended in ways that transcend ordinary physical processes opens up extraordinary implications for human potential and spiritual development. If awareness can indeed access information from across temporal boundaries, then practices that enhance consciousness might also enhance our capacity to navigate time more skillfully. Contemplative traditions have long claimed that advanced practitioners can develop temporal abilities that seem impossible from a conventional perspective. Yogis speak of accessing past and future lives. Mystics describe prophetic visions. Shamans claim the ability to journey through time to retrieve lost soul fragments or to glimpse healing possibilities that haven't yet manifested. While such claims remain scientifically unverified, they point toward possibilities that might become more plausible as our understanding of consciousness and time continues to evolve. If consciousness does indeed participate in creating temporal reality rather than simply observing it, then developing greater awareness might also involve developing greater temporal fluidity. This fluidity might not manifest as dramatic psychic abilities, but as subtle improvements in timing, intuition, and life navigation. People who meditate regularly often report better decision making abilities, improved capacity to be in the right place at the right time, and enhanced sensitivity to the optimal timing for various activities. These benefits might reflect not just improved attention and emotional regulation, but actual enhancements in consciousness's capacity to interface with temporal information. The therapeutic implications are equally intriguing. Many forms of psychological healing involve changing one's relationship to time, whether through processing traumatic memories that remain frozen in the past, developing better capacity to stay present with immediate experience, or cultivating hope and vision for possible futures. Perhaps healing consciousness involves not just changing mental content, but enhancing consciousness's capacity to move fluidly through temporal dimensions. As we approach the edges of what current science can definitively explain about time and consciousness, we find ourselves in territory that demands both intellectual rigor and imaginative openness. The questions we're exploring push against the boundaries of materialist explanation while remaining grounded in careful observation and logical reasoning. This boundary region between the known and unknown, between the measurable and the mysterious, might be exactly where the deepest insights about time's nature await discovery. Perhaps time will ultimately be understood not through any single approach, but through the creative integration of scientific investigation, philosophical reflection, and contemplative exploration. What emerges from this integration might be a view of time that's simultaneously more precise and more poetic than anything we currently imagine. A understanding that honors both the mathematical elegance revealed by physics and the lived richness experienced by consciousness. A perspective that recognizes time as both the most fundamental dimension of physical reality and the most intimate aspect of subjective experience. As our journey through time's mysteries continues to unfold, we find ourselves not just learning about time, but discovering new depths of what it means to exist as temporal beings in a universe where past, present, and future dance together in patterns of breathtaking complexity and beauty. The questions multiply even as understanding deepens, inviting us ever further into the heart of existence's greatest enigma. But perhaps the most startling revelation about time's nature comes not from the vastness of cosmic scales or the minutiae of quantum mechanics, but from something far more intimate, the realization that you might be living multiple timelines simultaneously without ever knowing it. Right now, as you listen to these words, your body is orchestrating thousands of temporal processes that operate according to completely different rhythms and rules. Consider the curious case of your cellular clocks. Every cell in your body contains its own molecular timekeeper, a genetic mechanism that cycles roughly every 24 hours, regardless of external light or darkness. These cellular clocks don't simply respond to your central biological rhythm, they actively negotiate with it, sometimes agreeing, sometimes rebelling in ways that create the complex temporal symphony of your physiology. Your liver cells operate on a schedule optimized for processing the day's nutrients and toxins. Your skin cells follow repair cycles that peak during nighttime hours. Your immune cells patrol according to rhythms that anticipate when you're most likely to encounter pathogens. Each cellular population maintains its own temporal agenda while somehow coordinating with the others to create the unified experience you call your body. But here's where it becomes truly mysterious. These cellular timekeepers can become desynchronized from each other and from your conscious awareness. Jet lag isn't just about feeling tired, it's about your various biological clocks falling out of temporal alignment. Your brain might adjust to a new time zone within days, while your digestive system stubbornly maintains the old schedule for weeks. You become a walking confederation of temporal states, each operating according to its own understanding of when now occurs. This internal temporal complexity suggests that the unified sense of present moment awareness might be more of an achievement than an automatic given. Your consciousness somehow weaves together information from these multiple biological timelines to create the singular experience of existing in the present. But what happens when this weaving process breaks down or operates differently than usual? People with certain neurological conditions report fascinating alterations in temporal experience that reveal just how constructed our normal sense of time really is. Some describe living in a world where cause and effect seem reversed, where they experience their response to events before the events themselves occur. Others report time fracturing into disconnected segments, where each moment exists in isolation without connection to past or future. These altered states aren't necessarily pathological. They might be glimpses into alternative ways consciousness can interface with temporal reality. Indigenous shamanic traditions often describe similar experiences as valuable sources of insight and healing. The shaman who journeys outside ordinary time might be accessing genuine alternative modes of temporal awareness rather than simply hallucinating. This possibility becomes particularly intriguing when we consider how different species experience temporal flow. A hummingbird's heart beats over 1,000 times per minute, and its visual system processes information at rates that would make our fastest movies appear as still photographs. From the hummingbird's perspective, our world might seem frozen in slow motion, while its own rapid fire existence unfolds with graceful precision. At the other extreme, consider the temporal experience of a giant sequoia tree. Some of these magnificent beings have been alive for over 3,000 years, experiencing the rise and fall of civilizations as brief seasonal changes. Their growth rhythms respond to climate cycles that span decades. Their reproduction strategies unfold over centuries. What would temporal awareness feel like from such a perspective? Would individual years blur together like days, while century long patterns reveal themselves as clearly as we perceive monthly cycles? These different temporal perspectives aren't just curious facts about biology. They hint at the possibility that consciousness itself might be capable of operating at radically different temporal scales. Perhaps the meditative traditions are correct in suggesting that advanced practitioners can learn to experience time at different rates, slowing down to perceive micro moments with extraordinary clarity, or speeding up to witness long term patterns that normally unfold too slowly for conscious observation. Modern neuroscience has begun to uncover the mechanisms that might make such temporal flexibility possible. The brain's default mode network, active when we're not focused on the external world, shows interesting connections to how we process temporal information. When this network is less active, during deep meditation, for instance, people often report alterations in their sense of time's passage. Perhaps learning to modulate this network's activity could allow conscious control over subjective temporal experience. The implications extend far beyond personal development. If consciousness can indeed operate at different temporal scales, then our approach to complex problems might benefit from learning to think change, for instance, temporally as well as logically. Climate unfolds over decades and centuries, time frames that challenge our evolved capacity for temporal planning. Perhaps developing greater temporal fluidity in consciousness could enhance our collective ability to address challenges that require long term thinking. Similarly, the rapid pace of technological change creates temporal pressures that our biological systems weren't designed to handle. We're constantly adapting to innovations that emerge faster than cultural wisdom can develop to guide their use. Learning to navigate multiple temporal scales simultaneously might be essential for maintaining psychological health in an era of accelerating change. This navigational challenge becomes even more complex when we consider how digital technology is reshaping temporal experience in unprecedented ways. Social media platforms operate according to algorithmic time rather than chronological time, presenting content based on relevance and engagement rather than when it was created. You might see a post from yesterday, followed by one from last week, followed by one from 5 minutes ago, all treated as equally immediate and present. This algorithmic temporality creates a new kind of temporal environment where past and present blur together in ways that would have been impossible before digital technology. Your temporal experience becomes partially curated by artificial intelligence systems that optimize for engagement rather than chronological coherence. The result is a kind of artificial temporal flow that follows psychological rather than physical principles. Virtual and augmented reality technologies push this even further, creating completely artificial temporal environments where time can be paused, rewound, fast forwarded, or looped according to the designer's intentions. Players often report losing all sense of real world time while immersed in these digital temporal landscapes. Hours can pass in what feels like minutes, or brief virtual experiences can feel like they lasted for extended periods. What's particularly fascinating is how quickly human consciousness adapts to these artificial temporal rules. Within minutes of entering a virtual environment, most people stop noticing the discrepancies between digital time and physical time. This adaptability suggests that our temporal processing systems are far more flexible than we typically realize, capable of operating according to different temporal logics depending on context. This flexibility raises profound questions about the relationship between natural and artificial temporal environments. If consciousness can adapt so readily to digital time, what does that tell us about the nature of temporal experience itself? Are we discovering new possibilities for temporal consciousness, or are we creating artificial substitutes that might ultimately impoverish our relationship with natural temporal rhythms? The question becomes particularly urgent as we spend increasing portions of our lives in digitally mediated temporal environments. Children who grow up with smartphones and social media develop temporal processing patterns that differ significantly from previous generations. They become experts at rapidly switching between multiple temporal streams, text conversations, social media feeds, video content, and real world interactions, often managing several simultaneously. This temporal multitasking might represent a genuine evolution in consciousness, an enhancement of our species' capacity to navigate complex temporal landscapes, but it might also fragment attention in ways that diminish our ability to experience the deep temporal rhythms that connect us to natural cycles and contemplative states of awareness. The tension between technological temporal acceleration and natural temporal rhythms appears throughout modern life. We carry devices that operate at gigahertz frequencies while our bodies still follow circadian rhythms that evolved over millions of years. We communicate instantly across global distances while our emotional processing systems still need time to integrate significant experiences. We have access to more information than any humans in history, while our capacity for wisdom still requires the slow cultivation that comes only through lived experience. Navigating this tension skillfully might require developing what we could call temporal literacy, the ability to consciously choose which temporal scale and rhythm is most appropriate for different activities and goals. Just as we learn to adjust our communication style depending on context, we might need to learn to adjust our temporal engagement depending on what we're trying to accomplish. Some activities benefit from the rapid fire processing that digital environments encourage. Gathering information, coordinating complex logistics, or maintaining social connections across distances all leverage the speed and efficiency of technological temporality. But other activities, deep reflection, creative insight, emotional healing, or spiritual development, might require stepping back into slower, more natural temporal rhythms. The art of temporal literacy would involve knowing when to accelerate and when to decelerate, when to embrace technological time and when to seek natural time, when to multitask across multiple temporal streams, and when to focus deeply within a single temporal flow. It would be a kind of temporal wisdom that honors both the possibilities opened by technology and the deeper rhythms that connect us to the natural world and to the contemplative dimensions of human experience. This wisdom becomes particularly important as we consider how temporal acceleration affects our capacity for meaning making and purpose finding. Meaning often emerges through the slow integration of experiences across extended periods of time. The significance of events frequently becomes clear only in retrospect, after we've had time to see how they connect to larger patterns and purposes in our lives. If we're constantly accelerating through experience without taking time for integration and reflection, we might find ourselves rich in information but poor in wisdom, connected to global networks but disconnected from deeper sources of meaning and purpose. The challenge isn't to reject technological temporality, but to develop the discernment to use it skillfully while maintaining access to the slower temporal rhythms that nurture wisdom and well being. Perhaps the deepest insight emerging from our exploration of time's mysteries is that temporal reality is far more creative and participatory than we ever imagined. Rather than being a fixed stage on which events play out, time appears to be a dynamic medium that responds to consciousness, intention, and attention in ways that science is only beginning to understand. If this participatory view is correct, then our relationship with time isn't just about managing schedules and optimizing efficiency. It's about learning to dance with temporal reality as a creative partner, discovering how consciousness and time can collaborate to bring forth experiences and possibilities that neither could create alone. This dance requires both precision and playfulness, both scientific understanding and artistic sensibility, both technological sophistication and contemplative depth. It invites us to become temporal artists, learning to work with time's malleable nature to create lives of greater meaning, connection, and joy. As we continue exploring these temporal frontiers, we find ourselves approaching questions that stretch beyond individual experience to encompass the collective temporal challenges and opportunities facing humanity as a whole. How do we coordinate across different cultural approaches to time? How do we balance immediate needs with long term sustainability? How do we maintain human agency in an era of algorithmic temporal control? These questions don't have simple answers, but they invite us into a conversation about time that's simultaneously practical and profound, immediate, and eternal. They suggest that understanding time isn't just an intellectual exercise, but an essential skill for navigating the complex temporal landscape of the 21st century and beyond. The journey into time's mysteries continues to unfold, revealing new layers of complexity and beauty with each step deeper into its enigmatic nature. What began as simple questions about temporal flow has opened into a vast exploration of consciousness, reality, and the very foundations of existence itself. And perhaps that's exactly as it should be, for time may be not just the dimension in which mysteries unfold, but the deepest mystery of all. But what if our entire quest to understand time has been approaching the mystery from the wrong direction entirely? What if instead of asking what time is, we should be asking what we're in relationship to time? This shift in perspective opens up possibilities that might sound like science fiction, but are grounded in some of the most rigorous research happening at the frontiers of consciousness studies and theoretical physics. Consider the strange case of people who claim to experience precognitive dreams, dreams that seem to contain the information about future events. While mainstream science remains skeptical, several well designed studies have documented statistically significant results that are difficult to explain through conventional models of temporal causation. People dream of plane crashes, natural disasters, or personal events days or weeks before they occur, with details specific enough to rule out coincidence. If these experiences reflect genuine temporal anomalies rather than selective memory or statistical flukes, they suggest that consciousness might not be as firmly anchored to the present moment as we typically assume. Perhaps awareness can sometimes slip its temporal moorings, drifting forward or backward through time like a boat that's broken free from its dock. This possibility becomes even more intriguing when we consider how memory actually works. When you recall a childhood experience, your brain doesn't simply retrieve a stored file. Instead, it reconstructs the memory from fragments scattered throughout your neural networks, often incorporating details from other memories or filling in gaps with plausible but inaccurate information. In a very real sense, the past you remember is created in the present moment of remembering. But here's the puzzling part. Sometimes people remember things that haven't happened yet, or remember alternative versions of events that differ from documented history. These temporal memory glitches might be dismissed as simple errors, but they raise fascinating questions about the relationship between consciousness and temporal reality. If memory is reconstructive rather than reproductive, and if consciousness can sometimes access information from outside its immediate temporal location, then the boundaries between past, present, and future might be more porous than we imagine. This porosity becomes particularly apparent in moments of crisis or extreme emotion. Emergency responders often describe time slowing down during critical situations, allowing them to process information and make decisions with seemingly impossible speed and clarity. Athletes speak of entering flow states where complex movements unfold with perfect timing, despite happening faster than conscious thought should allow. Musicians describe improvisational passages that feel like they're being played by someone else, emerging from a temporal space that transcends ordinary cause and effect. These peak performance states might represent moments when consciousness temporarily transcends its usual temporal limitations, accessing information and capabilities that exist outside the normal flow of sequential time. Rather than being anomalies, they might be glimpses of consciousness's natural temporal flexibility, usually hidden beneath the habits of ordinary awareness. The implications extend far beyond individual experience. If consciousness can indeed access information across temporal boundaries, then our approach to collective challenges might benefit from developing what we could call temporal intelligence, the ability to sense patterns and possibilities that extend beyond immediate circumstances. Indigenous cultures often speak of making decisions based on their impact 7 generations into the future. This long term thinking isn't just ethical wisdom, it might reflect a genuine capacity to sense the temporal consequences of present actions in ways that purely analytical approaches cannot match. The grandmother who insists on planting oak trees she'll never see mature might be responding to temporal information that transcends her individual lifespan. Modern research in complex systems theory suggests that such long term sensing might be more than wishful thinking. Complex systems often exhibit what scientists call emergent properties, characteristics that arise from the interactions between system components but cannot be predicted from studying the components in isolation. These emergent properties can sometimes be sensed intuitively before they can be calculated analytically, suggesting that consciousness might have access to information about system evolution that transcends logical analysis. Climate scientists increasingly recognize that understanding global climate change requires not just analyzing current data, but developing sensitivity to patterns that unfold over decades and centuries. The most accurate climate predictions often come from researchers who combine rigorous data analysis with intuitive pattern recognition, a kind of temporal sensing that bridges analytical and contemplative ways of knowing. This bridging becomes particularly important as we confront challenges that operate at temporal scales far beyond human evolution prepared us to handle. Nuclear waste remains dangerous for thousands of years. Genetic modifications can have consequences that unfold across multiple generations. Artificial intelligence systems might evolve in ways that transform civilization over timescales too rapid for traditional governance structures to address effectively. Managing these challenges requires developing collective temporal intelligence that can sense patterns and possibilities across multiple timescales simultaneously. This might involve not just better analytical tools, but also cultivating contemplative practices that enhance our species' capacity for temporal awareness. The contemplative traditions have always recognized that different states of consciousness provide access to different kinds of temporal information. The mystic who speaks of eternal truths discovered in timeless meditation might be accessing information that exists outside ordinary temporal flow. The visionary who sees possibilities for social transformation might be sensing patterns in the collective unconscious that haven't yet manifested in external reality. Rather than dismissing such experiences as subjective fantasies, we might consider them as potentially valid forms of temporal research. Investigations into aspects of time's nature that scientific instruments cannot yet measure, but conscious awareness can sometimes detect. Just as early astronomers used naked eye observations to discover patterns that later telescopes confirmed and refined, contemplative explorers of temporal reality might be mapping territories that future technologies will make accessible to broader investigation. This collaborative approach between contemplative and scientific investigation of time already shows promising results in several fields. Researchers studying the placebo effect have discovered that patients' beliefs about future healing can influence present physiological processes in ways that challenge conventional models of temporal causation. The expectation of improvement creates measurable changes in brain chemistry and immune function before any medical intervention takes place. Similarly, studies of intention and prayer have documented instances where focused mental attention appears to influence distant events in ways that don't conform to classical physics but align with quantum mechanical descriptions of non local correlation. While the mechanisms remain mysterious, the effects suggest that consciousness might participate in creating temporal reality through processes that transcend ordinary space and time limitations. These findings point toward a participatory universe where consciousness doesn't just observe temporal flow, but actively participates in creating it. From this perspective, every moment of awareness, every decision to pay attention to one possibility rather than another, every intention to create positive change contributes to the ongoing creation of temporal reality. This participatory view transforms how we understand personal responsibility and collective agency. If consciousness really does participate in creating the future through present intentions and actions, then developing greater awareness and more skillful intentions becomes not just personally beneficial, but collectively essential. The quality of our collective consciousness might directly influence the quality of the future that emerges from the quantum possibilities of the present moment. Such ideas might sound impossibly idealistic, but they align with emerging understandings from fields as diverse as quantum biology, social psychology, and systems theory. Quantum effects that were once thought to be confined to laboratory conditions have been discovered in biological processes like photosynthesis and bird navigation. Social movements often exhibit sudden phase transitions where new possibilities emerge rapidly from what seemed like stable conditions. Economic and political systems can shift dramatically when enough individuals change their behavior patterns simultaneously. These phenomena suggest that reality at every scale exhibits a kind of creative responsiveness to conscious intention and collective behavior. The future isn't simply determined by past conditions, but emerges through the complex interaction between existing patterns and the conscious choices being made in the present moment. If this creative responsiveness extends to temporal reality itself, then learning to work skillfully with time becomes one of the most important capacities we can develop both individually and collectively. This would involve not just managing our schedules more efficiently, but learning to sense temporal patterns, align with natural rhythms, and participate consciously in the ongoing creation of future possibilities. The skills required for such temporal artistry would combine scientific precision with contemplative sensitivity, analytical thinking with intuitive awareness, individual development with collective coordination. They would represent a new kind of temporal literacy that honors both the measurable aspects of time revealed by physics and the experiential dimensions discovered through contemplative investigation. Developing this temporal literacy might begin with simple practices, spending time in natural environments where we can attune to seasonal rhythms, learning to sense the optimal timing for different activities, cultivating attention to the subtle temporal patterns in our own consciousness and relationships. It might progress to more sophisticated abilities, sensing the temporal consequences of decisions before making them, coordinating collective actions across multiple timescales, participating consciously in the emergence of new possibilities from quantum uncertainty. The ultimate goal wouldn't be to control time, but to dance with it more skillfully, recognizing ourselves as partners in an ongoing creative process rather than victims of an inexorable flow. This partnership would honor both time's objective aspects, the precise measurements that enable technology and scientific understanding, and its subjective dimensions, the lived experience that gives meaning to temporal passage. Perhaps most importantly, this approach would recognize that understanding time isn't just an intellectual exercise, but a practical necessity for navigating the complex challenges of our historical moment. The climate crisis, technological disruption, social transformation, and spiritual awakening that characterize our era all unfold across multiple temporal scales and require responses that integrate scientific knowledge with contemplative wisdom. The ancient question of whether time is real or illusory might ultimately be less important than learning to work skillfully with whatever temporal reality turns out to be. Whether time flows or we move through it, whether it's fundamental or emergent, whether it's singular or multiple, the practical challenge remains the same: developing the capacity to participate consciously and skillfully in the ongoing creation of temporal reality. This participation requires both humility and boldness. Humility to recognize how much we don't yet understand about time's deepest nature, and boldness to experiment with new ways of relating to temporal reality based on the insights we do have. It requires both precision and playfulness, both discipline and creativity, both individual development and collective coordination. As our exploration of time's mysteries continues to unfold, we find ourselves not just learning about time, but discovering new possibilities for what it means to be conscious, creative, and collaborative beings existing within the vast temporal expanse of an evolving universe. The questions that began our journey continue to deepen and multiply, but perhaps that multiplication of mystery is itself a clue to time's nature, not a problem to be solved, but a creative medium to be explored, appreciated, and participated in with ever greater skill and wonder. The whispers of science concerning time's true nature grow more intriguing with each new discovery, each contemplative insight, each moment of direct temporal experience. And perhaps the most beautiful whisper of all is this: that in questioning time's nature, we discover not just the secrets of the universe, but the creative potential of consciousness itself to participate in the ongoing emergence of reality from the quantum foam of infinite possibility. In this light, every moment becomes an opportunity for temporal artistry, every breath a chance to dance more skillfully with the rhythm of existence, every conscious choice a contribution to the collective creation of the future that emerges from the eternal now. Time reveals itself not as our master, but as our partner in the greatest creative project of all, the ongoing birth of reality itself from the marriage of possibility and actuality, consciousness and cosmos, the timeless and the temporal. But perhaps the most extraordinary aspect of our temporal journey lies in recognizing that time itself might be listening to us, responding to our deepest questions in ways that blur the boundaries between scientific discovery and personal revelation. As we've explored the mysteries of temporal flow, relativistic effects, and quantum uncertainties, something curious has been happening. The very act of questioning time's nature seems to be changing our relationship with it. Consider how your experience of this present moment has shifted since we began our exploration. Are you more aware of the strange fact that you exist in this razor thin slice between past and future? Do you notice the curious way your consciousness seems to hover at the intersection of memory and anticipation, neither fully in the remembered past nor the imagined future, but somehow dancing between them? This heightened temporal awareness isn't just an intellectual byproduct of learning about physics and philosophy. It might be a glimpse into consciousness's natural capacity to interface more skillfully with temporal reality. The mystics and contemplatives who speak of transcending time might not be escaping into some otherworldly realm, but rather discovering time's deeper nature by learning to inhabit it more fully and consciously. What emerges from this fuller inhabitation is a paradoxical understanding. Time is simultaneously the most intimate aspect of our existence and the most universal feature of reality. Every heartbeat marks your personal rhythm within cosmic time. Every breath connects your individual temporal experience to the vast respiratory cycles of forests and oceans. Every thought participates in the ongoing evolution of consciousness itself as it explores its own temporal nature. This participation suggests that consciousness and time might be more like dance partners than like observer and observed. In a dance, neither partner controls the other completely, but each responds to the other's movements in ways that create something neither could achieve alone. Perhaps consciousness and time collaborate similarly, each shaping the other through their ongoing interaction to create the rich temporal texture of lived experience. From this collaborative perspective, developing greater temporal awareness becomes not just personally enriching, but cosmically significant. As consciousness learns to dance more skillfully with time, it might be contributing to time's own evolution, helping temporal reality explore new possibilities for creative expression through conscious beings who can appreciate, question, and participate in its deepest mysteries. The implications ripple outward in all directions. If individual consciousness can influence temporal reality through attention and intention, then collective consciousness might have even greater temporal creative capacity. The movements for social justice, environmental healing, and spiritual awakening that characterize our era might not just be responses to current conditions, but active participations in creating new temporal possibilities for human civilization. This creative participation doesn't require believing in supernatural abilities or abandoning scientific rigor. It simply requires recognizing that consciousness is itself a natural phenomenon that emerged from cosmic evolution and therefore participates in the same creative processes that gave birth to stars, galaxies, and the intricate dance of quantum possibilities that underlies all physical reality. When we approach temporal reality from this participatory perspective, even the most ordinary moments reveal extraordinary depths. Waiting for a traffic light to change becomes an opportunity to explore the curious relationship between psychological time and clock time. Watching a sunset becomes a meditation on Earth's rotation within the vast temporal rhythms of the solar system. Having a conversation with a friend becomes a recognition of how two streams of consciousness can synchronize to create shared temporal meaning. These everyday temporal experiences might seem mundane compared to the exotic physics of black holes and quantum superposition, but they represent the places where theoretical understanding meets lived reality. The abstract insights about time's malleable nature become practically relevant when we discover how to use them to enhance our daily experience of temporal flow. Perhaps the most practical application involves learning to sense the natural timing that underlies different activities and life phases. Just as plants and animals have evolved to synchronize with seasonal rhythms, human consciousness might have innate capacities for temporal sensing that modern life has obscured but not eliminated. Learning to recognize and trust these subtle temporal intuitions might enhance everything from creative work to relationship timing to major life decisions. This temporal sensing involves developing what we might call chronesthetic awareness, the ability to feel the quality and rhythm of different temporal moments. Some moments feel ripe for action, others call for patience. Some conversations want to unfold slowly and spaciously, others need the efficiency of focused exchange. Some decisions require quick, intuitive responses. Others benefit from extended reflection across multiple temporal scales. Developing chronesthetic sensitivity doesn't require any special abilities, just willingness to pay attention to the subtle temporal information that's always present but usually ignored. The feeling of whether this is the right time to make a phone call, start a project, or have a difficult conversation. The sense of when to speak and when to listen, when to act and when to wait, when to focus intensely and when to let attention soften and expand. As this sensitivity develops, life begins to feel less like a struggle against time and more like a collaboration with it. Instead of always feeling behind schedule or ahead of ourselves, we begin to discover the natural rhythm that allows activities to unfold with greater ease and effectiveness. This isn't about becoming passive or fatalistic, but about learning to work with temporal currents rather than constantly swimming against them. The development of chronesthetic awareness also opens up new possibilities for understanding the relationship between individual and collective temporal rhythms. Families, communities, organizations, and cultures all have their own temporal patterns and cycles. Learning to sense and honor these collective rhythms while maintaining individual temporal authenticity becomes a delicate art that requires both sensitivity and skill. In relationships, this might involve recognizing when partners are in different temporal phases, one needing space and reflection while the other seeks connection and engagement. Rather than forcing synchronization, chronesthetic awareness allows for honoring different temporal needs while maintaining relational harmony across time. In work environments, itasing the might involve reckon natural rhythms of creativity that allow collaboration and completion projects to unfold with greater efficiency and satisfaction. Instead of imposing arbitrary deadlines, chronosthetic management would seek to align project timing with the natural temporal rhythms of both individual contributors and collective creative processes. At societal levels, chronosthetic awareness might help us navigate the complex temporal challenges of our era with greater wisdom and effectiveness. Climate change, technological disruption, and cultural transformation all unfold according to their own temporal logics that don't always align with political or economic cycles. Learning to sense and respond to these deeper temporal patterns might be essential for creating sustainable and just responses to collective challenges. This broader application of temporal sensitivity points toward what we might call temporal ecology, the recognition that healthy temporal environments are as important as healthy physical environments for individual and collective well being. Just as we're learning to create physical environments that support human flourishing while honoring natural systems, we might need to learn to create temporal environments that support conscious development while honoring the deeper rhythms of cosmic evolution. Temporal ecology would involve designing technologies, institutions, and cultural practices that enhance rather than fragment our natural temporal capacities. Instead of creating ever faster systems that outpace human temporal processing abilities, we might develop technologies that amplify our capacity for temporal sensing and that help us navigate multiple temporal scales simultaneously without losing touch with natural rhythms. Education from a temporal ecological perspective would involve teaching children not just time management skills, but temporal literacy, the ability to sense appropriate timing, work skillfully with different temporal rhythms, and participate consciously in the ongoing creation of temporal reality. This might include contemplative practices that develop temporal sensitivity alongside analytical skills that help understand time's physical and mathematical properties. Healthcare would recognize that many illnesses involve temporal dysregulation, disruptions in the natural temporal rhythms that coordinate physiological, psychological, and social well being. Treatment might focus not just on correcting specific symptoms, but on helping individuals rediscover their natural temporal patterns and learn to maintain temporal coherence amid the accelerating pace of modern life. The arts would be recognized as essential practices for exploring and expressing the full spectrum of temporal experience. Music, dance, poetry, and visual arts all work with time in unique ways that can expand consciousness's capacity for temporal creativity and appreciation. Supporting artistic exploration of temporal themes might be as important for collective temporal health as supporting scientific research into time's physical properties. Perhaps most importantly, temporal ecology would recognize contemplative practice as a form of temporal research that complements and enriches scientific investigation. The insights gained through meditation, prayer, and other contemplative approaches to temporal reality would be valued alongside empirical findings from physics and neuroscience as essential contributions to understanding time's full nature. This integration of contemplative and scientific approaches to time reflects a broader recognition that consciousness itself is a natural phenomenon worthy of careful study and development. Just as we've learned to enhance physical health through understanding biological processes, we might learn to enhance temporal health through understanding the processes by which consciousness interfaces with temporal reality. The ultimate goal of such integration wouldn't be to solve the mystery of time once and for all, but to develop ever greater capacity for participating skillfully and joyfully in temporal reality, whatever its ultimate nature turns out to be. Whether time proves to be fundamental or emergent, flowing or static, singular or multiple, the practical challenge remains the same: learning to live as conscious beings within temporal reality in ways that honor both its objective properties and its subjective dimensions. This practical challenge becomes particularly urgent as we navigate an era of unprecedented temporal acceleration and complexity. The pace of technological change, the global scale of communication and coordination, the long term implications of current decisions, and the rapid evolution of human consciousness itself all create temporal pressures that previous generations never faced. Meeting these pressures skillfully requires not just better analytical tools, but also greater temporal wisdom, the kind of deep understanding that emerges from patient exploration of time's mysteries, combined with committed practice in working with temporal reality more consciously. This wisdom cannot be downloaded or purchased, but must be cultivated through the slow work of paying attention to temporal experience with both scientific precision and contemplative depth. Thus, as our exploration of time's deepest mysteries draws toward its close, we find ourselves not with final answers, but with enriched questions and enhanced capacity for living those questions more fully. The enigma of time remains as mysterious as ever, but our relationship with that mystery has been transformed through the journey of exploration itself. We began by asking whether time is illusion, dimension, or flow, and we discovered that it might be all three simultaneously, or something else entirely that transcends these categories. We explored how consciousness and time dance together in ways that challenge our deepest assumptions about the nature of reality and the possibilities for human experience. What emerges from this exploration is not a final theory of time, but a renewed sense of wonder at the extraordinary mystery in which we find ourselves embedded. Every moment reveals itself as simultaneously utterly ordinary and absolutely miraculous, a unique occurrence in the vast temporal expanse of cosmic evolution, and an intimate expression of consciousness's capacity to know purs of science concerning time's nature itself through temporal experience. The whys continue to multiply and deepen, each new discovery opening up vistas of possibility that stretch imagination to its limits. Yet perhaps the most profound whisper of all is the one that speaks not through instruments or equations, but through the direct experience of being a conscious being, existing within the great mystery of temporal reality itself. In recognizing ourselves as both investigators of time's mystery and expressions of that mystery, we discover that understanding time and understanding consciousness are ultimately inseparable endeavors. The deepest insights into time's nature come not from stepping outside temporal reality to observe it objectively, but from learning to inhabit it more fully, consciously, and skillfully. This inhabitation transforms every moment into an opportunity for temporal discovery, every breath into a chance to explore the interface between consciousness and cosmos, every experience into a contribution to the ongoing evolution of awareness itself as it comes to know its own temporal nature ever more completely. The journey into time's mysteries thus reveals itself as simultaneously a journey into the heart of existence and into the depths of our own conscious nature. In questioning time, we discover not just the secrets of the universe, but the creative potential of awareness itself to participate in the ongoing emergence of reality from the quantum foam of pure possibility. And so we find ourselves not at the end of our temporal journey, but at a new beginning, equipped with deeper questions and enhanced capacity for exploring the endless mystery of time's whispered secrets. The conversation between consciousness and temporality continues, and we are both its investigators and its living expressions, forever embedded in the great dance of existence as it explores its own infinite creative potential through the medium of time itself. The story of time refuses to conclude because perhaps that's the most honest thing we can say about it, that it remains beautifully, persistently, gloriously unfinished. As we've journeyed through the labyrinth of temporal mysteries, each answer has bloomed into three new questions. Each insight has opened doors we never knew existed, and each moment of understanding has revealed vast territories of wonder still waiting to be explored. Consider where we find ourselves now, suspended between certainty and mystery, like dewdrops caught on spider silk at dawn. We've learned that time bends and stretches, that consciousness and temporality dance together in ways that challenge everything we thought we knew about reality. We've discovered that the flowing river we thought we understood might be a vast landscape, or perhaps something else entirely that our language hasn't yet learned to describe. But here's what strikes me as most remarkable about our temporal expedition. The more we've learned about time's strangeness, the more intimate our relationship with it has become. Every tick of the clock now carries whispers of relativity. Every heartbeat reminds us that we're embedded in multiple temporal rhythms simultaneously. Every conscious moment reveals itself as a small miracle of coordination between quantum uncertainties and cosmic regularities. This intimacy suggests something profound about the nature of understanding itself. Perhaps true knowledge isn't about stepping outside mystery to observe it objectively, but about learning to inhabit mystery more skillfully, more consciously, more lovingly. The physicist who spends decades studying time's mathematical properties, and the mystic who discovers timelessness in meditation, might be exploring different aspects of the same vast territory, each contributing essential pieces to a puzzle that may never be fully solved, but can always be more deeply appreciated. What emerges from this appreciation is a kind of temporal poetry, a way of being with time that honors both its precise measurability and its lived richness. We can marvel at atomic clocks that lose less than a second over cosmic ages while simultaneously celebrating the way time dissolves entirely when we're lost in conversation with someone we love. We can study the gravitational effects that make your head age faster than your feet, while also honoring the indigenous wisdom that sees time as circular rather than linear, as a spiral where patterns repeat at ever larger scales. This both and rather than either or approach to time's mysteries reflects something important about consciousness itself. We are beings capable of analytical precision and contemplative depth, of scientific rigor and poetic appreciation, of technological mastery and spiritual surrender. Perhaps the reason time's mystery has proven so enduring is that it requires all these capacities working together to even begin to approach its full nature. The implications ripple outward in ways that transform how we understand not just time, but existence itself. If consciousness and temporality are as intimately connected as our exploration suggests, then developing greater awareness isn't just personally beneficial, it's cosmically significant. Every moment of enhanced consciousness, every instance of more skillful temporal navigation, every practice that deepens our appreciation for time's mystery contributes to the universe's ongoing project of understanding itself through conscious beings. This participatory vision transforms even the most ordinary temporal experiences into opportunities for cosmic collaboration. Waiting patiently in a long line becomes practice in working skillfully with temporal rhythms beyond our control. Choosing the right moment to speak or remain silent becomes a form of temporal artistry. Recognizing when to act quickly and when to let situations unfold naturally becomes a way of dancing with the deeper currents that move through individual life and collective history. Such temporal artistry doesn't require special abilities or mystical experiences, though it doesn't exclude them either. It simply requires willingness to pay attention to the subtle temporal information that surrounds us constantly. The sense of whether this moment calls for action or patience, the feeling of being in sync or out of phase with the rhythms of our environment, the intuitive recognition of when something is beginning, ripening, or coming to completion. As this sensitivity develops, we begin to discover what we might call the wisdom of timing. Not just the practical knowledge of when to plant seeds or when to harvest crops, but the deeper understanding of how to align our actions with the natural flow of temporal possibilities. This wisdom emerges from the marriage of careful observation and patient practice, of analytical understanding and intuitive sensing, of scientific knowledge and contemplative insight. The cultivation of temporal wisdom becomes particularly important as we navigate an era of unprecedented change and complexity. The challenges we face, ecological crisis, technological disruption, social transformation, spiritual awakening, all unfold across multiple temporal scales and require responses that integrate immediate action with long term vision, individual choice with collective coordination, human timescales with natural rhythms. Meeting these challenges skillfully requires not just better technologies or more efficient systems, but greater temporal literacy across all levels of society. We need educational approaches that teach children how to sense appropriate timing alongside analytical problem solving skills. We need economic models that honor natural cycles rather than demanding infinite growth on a finite planet. We need political processes that can address problems unfolding over decades while remaining responsive to immediate needs. Perhaps most importantly, we need cultural practices that help us maintain connection to the deeper temporal rhythms that nourish human consciousness and creativity. The acceleration of modern life, while bringing many benefits, can also fragment attention and disconnect us from the slower temporal processes that generate wisdom, meaning, and spiritual insight. Finding balance requires neither rejecting technological temporality nor abandoning natural rhythms, but rather learning to navigate skillfully between them. This might involve designing technologies that amplify rather than replace our natural temporal capacities, creating work environments that honor both efficiency and reflection, and developing social institutions that can operate effectively across multiple temporal scales simultaneously. The arts play a crucial role in this temporal rebalancing, offering experiences that help consciousness explore the full spectrum of temporal possibilities. Music teaches us about rhythm and flow, about the interplay between repetition and variation, about how meaning emerges through temporal relationships. Dance connects us to embodied temporal rhythms that precede and inform cognitive understanding. Poetry works with the temporal dimensions of language to create meanings that transcend literal content. Visual arts can capture moments of temporal experience in ways that invite prolonged contemplation. These artistic explorations of temporality aren't merely entertainment or decoration, but essential research into consciousness's relationship with time. They help develop the temporal sensitivity and creativity needed to navigate our complex historical moment with greater skill and wisdom. Supporting artistic investigation of temporal themes might be as important for collective well being as supporting scientific research into time's physical properties. Contemplative practices offer another essential dimension of temporal exploration, one that complements and enriches both scientific and artistic approaches. Through meditation, prayer, and other forms of inner investigation, consciousness can explore its own temporal nature directly, discovering aspects of time's mystery that cannot be accessed through external observation alone. The insights emerging from contemplative exploration often sound paradoxical when translated into ordinary language. Time stops while also flowing more freely. The present moment expands to include past and future, while also revealing itself as dimensionless. Personal time dissolves into cosmic time, while individual awareness becomes more vivid and precise. These paradoxes aren't signs of confused thinking, but indicators that consciousness is encountering aspects of reality that transcend the categories of ordinary conceptual thought. Just as quantum mechanics revealed that nature, at its deepest levels, operates according to principles that seem impossible from a classical perspective, contemplative investigation reveals that time at its deepest levels might operate according to principles that seem impossible from an ordinary temporal perspective. Rather than dismissing such insights as subjective fantasies, we might consider them as valid forms of temporal research that complement scientific investigation. The mystic who discovers timeless presence and the physicist who studies temporal dilation might be exploring different aspects of the same underlying mystery, each contributing essential perspectives to our evolving understanding. This collaborative approach to temporal investigation reflects a broader recognition that consciousness itself is a natural phenomenon worthy of careful study and development. Just as we've learned to enhance physical health through understanding biological processes, we might learn to enhance temporal health through understanding how consciousness interfaces with temporal reality. Temporal health would involve maintaining coherence across the multiple temporal rhythms that coordinate human experience while remaining flexible enough to adapt to changing circumstances. It would include the capacity to focus intensely when situations require concentrated attention and to relax into broader temporal awareness when circumstances call for patience and perspective. Developing such temporal health requires practice, just as developing physical health requires exercise and proper nutrition. The practices might include regular periods of contemplative silence that allow consciousness to settle into its natural temporal rhythms, spending time in natural environments where artificial temporal pressures give way to seasonal and circadian cycles, and cultivating activities that require sustained attention and allow for the deep temporal engagement that generates meaning and satisfaction. Perhaps most importantly, temporal health involves maintaining wonder and curiosity about time's mysterious nature. The moment we think we've figured out what time really is, we close ourselves off from the ongoing discoveries that emerge when consciousness approaches temporal reality with fresh eyes and an open heart. This wonder filled approach to time's mystery transforms every moment into an opportunity for discovery. The simple act of breathing becomes an exploration of rhythm and flow. Watching clouds move across the sky becomes a meditation on the multiple temporal scales that coordinate weather patterns. Having a conversation becomes recognition of how two streams of consciousness can create shared temporal meaning through the mysterious alchemy of communication. These everyday temporal experiences might seem mundane compared to the exotic physics of relativistic effects and quantum uncertainties, but they represent the places where abstract understanding meets lived reality. The profound insights about time's nature become practically relevant when we discover how to use them to enhance our moment to moment experience of being alive. And perhaps that's the most beautiful discovery of all, that understanding time isn't ultimately about solving an intellectual puzzle, but about learning to live more fully within the great temporal mystery that surrounds and includes us. Whether time proves to be fundamental or emergent, absolute or relative, linear or cyclical, the practical invitation remains the same: to inhabit each moment with greater presence, appreciation, and skill. This inhabitation doesn't require believing any particular theory about time's ultimate nature. It simply requires recognizing that we are temporal beings embedded within temporal reality, and that our conscious engagement with that reality contributes to its ongoing evolution. Every moment of awareness, every choice to pay attention rather than drift unconsciously, every decision to respond with wisdom rather than react automatically becomes a small contribution to the universe's project of understanding itself. From this participatory perspective, our exploration of time's mysteries reveals itself as simultaneously a scientific investigation, an artistic creation, and a spiritual practice. We are not separate from the phenomenon we're studying, but intimately embedded within it, shaped by it, even as we help to shape it through our conscious engagement. This recognition transforms our relationship with temporal uncertainty from frustration to fascination. Instead of demanding final answers about time's nature, we can appreciate the ongoing conversation between consciousness and temporality as one of existence's most beautiful and meaningful dimensions. The questions themselves become as valuable as any answers we might discover. As our gentle journey through time's whispered secrets draws toward its natural pause, we find ourselves not with conclusions, but with enriched capacity for living within mystery. The enigma of time remains as profound as ever, but our relationship with that enigma has been transformed through the process of exploration itself. We began by wondering whether time is illusion, dimension, or flow, and we've discovered that it might be all three simultaneously, or perhaps something else entirely that transcends such categories. We've explored how consciousness and temporality dance together in ways that challenge our deepest assumptions while opening up possibilities we never imagined. What emerges is not mastery over time, but partnership with it, not solution to its mystery, but deeper appreciation for its inexhaustible richness. We find ourselves invited into an ongoing relationship with temporal reality that honors both its precise mathematical properties and its lived experiential dimensions. This invitation extends beyond individual exploration to encompass collective temporal challenges and opportunities. How do we create societies that honor both efficiency and contemplation? How do we design technologies that enhance rather than fragment our natural temporal capacities? How do we address global challenges that unfold across timescales longer than individual human lives? These questions don't have simple answers, but they invite us into conversations that are simultaneously practical and profound, immediate and eternal. They suggest that understanding time isn't just an academic exercise, but an essential capacity for navigating the complex temporal landscape of human existence in the 21st century and beyond. The whispers of science concerning time's nature continue to multiply and deepen, each new discovery opening up vistas of possibility that stretch imagination beyond its apparent limits. Quantum mechanics suggests that reality at its foundation might be fundamentally temporal, with time emerging from the probabilistic dance of quantum possibilities. Relativity reveals that space and time are woven together in ways that make temporal experience dependent on motion and gravity. Neuroscience shows that consciousness constructs temporal experience through complex neural processes that can be altered, enhanced, or expanded. Yet perhaps the most profound whisper comes not through instruments or equations, but through direct experience of being conscious beings embedded within the great mystery of temporal reality itself. In every heartbeat, every breath, every moment of awareness, we encounter time's mystery, not as an external object to be studied, but as the very medium of our existence. This direct encounter reveals that understanding time and understanding consciousness are ultimately inseparable endeavors. The deepest insights into temporal reality emerge not from standing outside it as detached observers, but from learning to inhabit it more fully, consciously, and skillfully. Such inhabitation transforms every moment into an opportunity for temporal discovery, every conscious choice into a contribution to reality's ongoing evolution, every breath into a participation in the cosmic dance of existence as it explores its own infinite creative potential through the mysterious medium we call time. And so we find ourselves not at the end of our temporal journey, but at a new beginning, equipped with deeper questions and enhanced capacity for exploring the endless mystery of time's nature. The conversation between consciousness and temporality continues, and we are both its investigators and its living expressions, forever embedded in the great dance of existence as it discovers itself through the extraordinary phenomenon of temporal awareness. The mystery remains beautiful and intact, inviting us ever deeper into the heart of what it means to be conscious beings dancing with time in this magnificent, mysterious, temporally unfolding universe. And perhaps that invitation itself is the deepest whisper of all. The quiet suggestion that in questioning time's nature, we discover not just the secrets of the cosmos, but the creative potential of consciousness itself to participate in the ongoing birth of reality from the marriage of possibility and actuality, the timeless and the temporal, mystery and understanding. Sleep well, fellow temporal travelers, and may your dreams carry you gently through the night's own mysterious rhythms toward whatever temporal adventures tomorrow's dawn may bring. And so, as we drift toward the gentle close of our temporal journey tonight, let me pose one final question that has woven itself quietly through every moment of our exploration. What if the deepest truth about time isn't something we discover, but something we become? Consider this curious possibility that your very existence as a conscious being reading these words right now might be time's way of experiencing itself from the inside, that every moment of awareness, every heartbeat, every thought might be temporal reality exploring its own nature through the extraordinary phenomenon of embodied consciousness. This isn't mere poetic fancy, but a recognition that emerges naturally from everything we've explored together. Consciousness doesn't observe time from some external vantage point, but arises within it, participates in. It helps shape it through the mysterious alchemy of awareness, meeting temporal flow. When you remember a childhood summer afternoon, that memory isn't separate from time, but is time remembering itself through the neural networks of your brain when you anticipate tomorrow's sunrise. That anticipation isn't outside temporal flow, but is future possibility, reaching backward through consciousness to touch the present moment. From this perspective, every instance of temporal awareness becomes simultaneously deeply personal and cosmically significant. Your individual experience of duration, rhythm, and flow isn't just your private relationship with time, but time's own self exploration through the unique lens of your particular consciousness. This recognition transforms our relationship with temporal uncertainty from frustration to profound appreciation. Instead of demanding to know what time really is, we can marvel at the fact that we are beings capable of asking such questions at all, that the universe has evolved conscious entities who can wonder about their own temporal nature. The indigenous wisdom traditions have long recognized this participatory relationship with temporal reality, speaking of time not as a resource to be managed, but as a living presence to be honored, not as a mechanical process, but as a sacred dimension of existence that unfolds through relationship and reciprocity. Modern physics inadvertently echoes these ancient insights through its discoveries about the observer effect and quantum participation. The act of measurement doesn't just reveal pre existing properties, but participates in determining what becomes actual from the field of quantum possibilities. Consciousness and physical reality dance together in ways that challenge any simple separation between observer and observed. Perhaps this dance extends to temporal reality itself. Perhaps your moments of wondering about time's nature, your experiences of temporal flow, your capacity to remember past and anticipate future, all participate in time's own ongoing self discovery through conscious beings. This participatory understanding suggests that developing greater temporal awareness isn't just personally enriching, but contributes to the universe's project of understanding itself through embodied consciousness. Every moment of enhanced temporal sensitivity, every instance of more skillful navigation of temporal rhythms, Every deepening appreciation for time's mystery adds to the cosmos's growing self knowledge. Such recognition brings with it both humility and responsibility. Humility because it reveals how embedded we are within processes vastly larger than individual understanding responsibility, because it suggests that our conscious engagement with temporal reality matters in ways that extend far beyond personal experience. The future of human relationship with time might depend not just on technological advances or scientific discoveries, but on our collective capacity to develop what we might call temporal wisdom, the ability to sense appropriate timing, to honor natural rhythms, to participate consciously in the ongoing creation of temporal reality through mindful attention and skillful action. This wisdom can't be downloaded or purchased, but must be cultivated through patient practice. The slow work of learning to pay attention to temporal experience with both precision and appreciation, both analytical clarity and contemplative depth. As you settle into sleep tonight, perhaps you might carry with you this gentle invitation to notice the temporal rhythms that coordinate your transition from waking consciousness to dream states. The gradual slowing of heartbeat and breath, the softening of mental activity, the mysterious process by which awareness transforms from focused attention to the diffuse receptivity of sleep in these liminal moments between day and night, waking and dreaming. You might glimpse something of time's malleable nature, the way consciousness can stretch moments into seemingly endless duration or compress hours into what feels like minutes. The curious temporal logic of dreams, where past, present, and future blend in impossible, yet somehow meaningful sequences. These natural alterations of temporal experience, available to every human being every night, might be glimpses into time's deeper nature, reminders that the flowing river we experience during waking hours is just one possible mode of temporal existence. Among many, what we've discovered together tonight is that time reveals itself as simultaneously the most intimate dimension of personal experience and the most universal feature of cosmic reality. It connects the quantum realm to galactic scales, the immediate present to evolutionary history, the individual heartbeat to the rhythm of expanding spacetime itself. Whether time proves ultimately to be fundamental or emergent, absolute or relative, flowing or static, the practical invitation remains beautifully constant to live as conscious beings embedded within temporal reality in ways that honor both its mystery and its immediacy, both its precision and its poetry. This living within temporal mystery transforms every moment into an opportunity for discovery, every breath into a participation in cosmic rhythms, every conscious choice into a contribution to reality's ongoing evolution through the extraordinary phenomenon of temporal awareness. And so our gentle exploration draws to its natural pause, not because we've solved time's mystery, but because we've discovered something perhaps more valuable, a way of being with temporal reality that embraces both questioning and appreciation, both understanding and wonder. The whispers of science concerning time's nature will continue to unfold through future discoveries and insights. But tonight they've given us something precious, a renewed sense of participation in the grand temporal adventure that is existence itself. As you drift toward sleep, may you carry with you this recognition that you are not separate from time's mystery, but an intimate expression of it, a conscious being through whom the universe explores its own temporal nature with every heartbeat, every dream, every moment of awareness. Sleep well, fellow traveler, in the vast temporal landscape of existence, and may your dreams remind you that time's deepest secrets might not need to be solved, but simply lived, appreciated, and danced with in the ongoing celebration of consciousness, meeting cosmos in the eternal, now that somehow contains all moments. Thank you for sharing this temporal journey together, and until we meet again in whatever corner of space time awaits, may you find yourself ever more skillfully attuned to the gentle rhythms that connect your individual existence to the magnificent temporal symphony of the universe itself. Good night. And here we are, dear fellow wanderers, in the vast temporal landscape of existence, arriving not at answers, but at something far more precious, a transformed relationship with the beautiful enigma we call time. We began this gentle journey asking whether time is illusion, dimension, or flow, and we've discovered something wonderfully unexpected, that perhaps the deepest truth about time isn't found in choosing between these possibilities, but in recognizing that we ourselves are woven into the very fabric of temporal mystery. Tonight we've seen time bend and stretch through Einstein's insights, watched it emerge from quantum uncertainties, felt it pulse through our cellular rhythms and neural networks. We've explored how consciousness and temporality dance together in ways that challenge everything we thought we knew about reality, only to discover that this dance isn't something we observe from the outside, but something we participate in with every heartbeat, every breath, every moment of awareness. What strikes me as most remarkable is how our exploration has revealed time to be simultaneously the most intimate aspect of our existence and the most universal feature of reality. Your personal experience of this moment, the gentle settling into evening, the quiet rhythm of your breathing, the way these words unfold in your awareness, connects you to the vast temporal symphony that orchestrates everything from quantum fluctuations to cosmic evolution. Perhaps this is time's most beautiful whisper, that in questioning its nature, we discover not just the secrets of the universe, but our own profound participation in the ongoing creation of temporal reality. Every moment of consciousness, every choice to pay attention rather than drift unconsciously, every recognition of appropriate timing becomes a small but significant contribution to the cosmos exploring its own temporal nature through beings like us. The questions we've explored tonight will continue to deepen and multiply, as all good questions should. But maybe that's exactly as it should be. Time reveals itself not as a problem to be solved, but as a creative medium to be appreciated, explored, and danced with ever more skillfully. So as you drift towards sleep, carrying these whispered secrets of science into your dreams, remember that you're not separate from time's mystery, but an intimate expression of it. Your consciousness threading through this moment, your heartbeat marking personal rhythm within cosmic time, your capacity to wonder about temporal flow, all of this is time itself coming to know its own nature through the extraordinary phenomenon of aware existence. Sleep well, dear temporal travelers. May your dreams remind you that time's deepest truths aren't meant to be grasped, but lived, not conquered, but collaborated with in the magnificent, ongoing dance of consciousness and cosmos, discovering themselves together in the eternal, now that somehow embraces all moments. Good night.